Hey, and welcome to Hometown Hauntings from Ghost City Tours. I am your host today, Stephanie, and today for our first episode of season 2, we have Justin with us from Boston. Justin has been a longtime guide with us, and when I say that he is a favorite on staff, it is not only from us at the guide team management side, it is also from his fellow teammates and our guests. So Justin, welcome to our show today, and we can't wait to hear some of the stories you have and things that you have to share about Boston.
Thank you. I'm humbled.
So how did you ever get the job of becoming a tour guide with us?
That's a very interesting story.
Like your first interview here of like when you
Yeah.
first went through your interview. So how did you get the job with us?
Well, I I had a very interesting road getting here. I had just bought a house, and I was lucky enough that me and my fiance, we were able to finance a house, and then my job at the time uh, decided to downsize without telling a lot of people in advance, and suddenly I needed work. And um, it was a job that I didn't necessarily enjoy it as much, but it paid a lot of bills, and I was kind of burnt out with that. And my fiance actually was searching for work at the time for changing their own job, and they said, "Hey, if you are looking for something, it may not, pay the entire mortgage, but it's
Mhm.
actually fun. We have openings for being a tour guide." And as they put it, well, you're a theater kid, you're dramatic, and also you like spooky stuff.
Yeah.
So why not try?
It's
And
all of those good combination of skills that we look for when we're hiring guides, for sure.
yeah, I had a very pleasant interview. Sorry if my dog is snoring on my lap. Um, I had a very pleasant interview where I had just sent off a small letter saying, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm interested in, both the history side of learning more, because history is very important, and then also the spooky side, because that's always very fun to tell other people.
Yeah.
And I got a phone call. Uh, they said, hey, are you essentially, are you sincere about wanting to do this, and then are you going to actually show up? And I said, yeah. And they said, great, well, here's the next steps. So
Mhm.
I came on in about the middle of July.
Mhm.
Had a sort of trial by fire during the summer crush
Okay.
of guests,
Mhm.
and it
Mhm.
was it was a blast, so I've stuck with it.
Awesome. Did you have a preference in the content between the adult tours and the family-friendly tour?
um I didn't have a preference as much. I found there were different ways of presenting.
Mhm.
Um, with the adults tour, I liked one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten from other guides was, at the beginning, before you start, ask people what they want. And after the general, hey, here's who I am, please, take photos to your heart's content. If you need to smoke, take a
Mhm.
step back just in case anybody has asthma. Um, One of the best pieces of advice was, ask them, are you here for, I would always put it as, are you here for a historical tour that touches on the last 400 years of Boston with some nasty stuff on the side, or do you want the nasty giblets of the tour? Oh, and then everyone would always say, like, the giblets. And then maybe 2 in 100 tours you would
I
get
picture
people.
someone raising a chalice when you say it.
Yeah. I would always have people like, that one, ooh, that one.
Yeah.
And you sort of gear it that way, just because it's what the majority of people are there for.
Mhm.
And then we do have the many groups where, like, well, I'd want a bit of both. And you have to preface it as well with, this is also going to touch on the history, so I'm not just going to tell you bloods and guts stories.
Right.
um, and Honestly, I didn't really change a lot of the content between those versions. It was just kind of how you present it. It's the difference of, am I going to present it kind of like a fun professor, or am I going to present it like I'm, ooh, and
Yeah.
going nuts with it?
Going mad with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the kids tour, it was, I would still ask that. It would just be okay if I'm worried about if people want the nasty giblets tour, then I'm not going to obviously say all the nasty giblets if there are underage people there. But I'll focus on it rather uh than talking about here's the intricacies of history and why each stop is historically important, and going from there. So there wasn't that much difference. I told a couple of different stories.
Mhm.
There's a very infamous story at the Omni Parker House
Mhm.
about a gentleman who took his own life up in room 303. But aside from that one, that was the only one that was really, I'm going to not tell this in front of kids.
Right.
Um, all the rest were, I'll tell it. There just might be some details that I omit.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other, the thing that really helped, and I don't remember if other guides had said it or if it was just it came with doing this over and over.
Mhm.
One of the things that really, really helped was choosing a kind of narrative path between
Mhm.
the stops so
Mhm.
that you have, here's whatever the first stop is, and you sort of do the same preface of, okay, 1630, the Puritans are coming over to Boston, and then how does it tie in with this first stop, so that everybody has that as kind of the underlying context. But now we can talk about each individual stop
Yeah.
rather than it be, okay, we're 7 stops in and let me tell you who the Puritans are.
Some of them do kind of jump around like that, and it is hard to keep track of like what I'm always like in my head on that timeline. Like, where are we on the timeline? How come we're skipping around? So,
Yeah.
like, I guess I always appreciate when someone can lay things out more chronological for me so that we're not jumping from the 1800s to the 1700s, then back up to the 1900s. And that is hard to keep track of when you're learning the content or learning the tour.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
staying on that straight line makes it a lot easier to follow that.
Yeah.
Very cool. What is your favorite story that you presented? Is there one that you absolutely love to tell? Like
Um,
pure fun of it, or did it spend years in your mind?
oh, that's a great question. I always really liked the one that always made me laugh the most, and
Mhm,
it perhaps is I mean, you have to have a little bit of dark humor to
mhm,
tell all of these stories, but the one that made me laugh the most, just for the sheer I can't believe this is happening,
mhm,
is down at the old state house. There was a a cursed figurehead. And I always tell people, if you search up Old State House figurehead,
mhm,
you can actually find her on Google. They have articles about her. They have, here's the Google images,
mhm.
and the the people who search it up always go, "Oh God, her!" And then they show me their phone, and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, that's what
Is
she
it really
looks
that
like."
bad?
Eh, I mean, if you don't mind, I can try
Yeah,
and find it.
I would like to see. That is something
Yeah.
you obviously encourage. Like if you have a picture, show it on tour, and if you have
Mhm.
a picture, show it on the podcast.
That's her.
Okay, look like a little Charlie Chaplin maybe
Yeah, yeah.
at a circus.
She's not a happy lady.
No.
The story goes there was a gentleman who was up in Maine. He was a captain of a ship, and back in, I believe it was the 1860s. It's been a little while since I searched up the dates.
Mhm,
He decides, hey, I have enough money, I've saved up, I want to buy or commission a figurehead for the front of my ship, but I don't want to have the usual like tavern wench or mermaid or anything like that. I instead am going to commission a woodworker to do a carving of my wife, so I remember who I'm going home to. And evidently, his wife was not very thrilled that he was going off to sea again.
Okay.
So as they are loading up the ship, everything's getting put on board. They put the figurehead on the front of the ship and they sail off from Maine into Boston Harbor. Now, Boston Harbor, I always love to tell people when we reach the old State House, which is a nice, probably 5-story building surrounded by many, many skyscrapers. I'll tell them, welcome to the old State House, the tallest building in Boston, formerly, because you would have, here's all of these other tall buildings. But the old State House was on the waterfront back in the day. Now, Boston, a fun historical fact, Boston used to be Tremontaine, or three mountains or three hills. You have Beacon Hill, which is still here, and then two others that were kind of sanded down and then put into our back bay. So our waterfront got extended by about a mile or so. Originally, it pressed up right across the street from our old State House, and that was kind of by design, so that you would have here's ships sailing in, and they would see this magnificently tall building, and they'd be like, "Ooh, it's Boston." But uh, Either way, the ship sails in, and this nice figurehead is right on the front, staring morosely out at everybody in Boston who's waiting for their goods and supplies. And when they see this ship coming in, they'll go, "Hey, wait a minute, that ship, there's something wrong with it. It's on fire. Smoke's pouring up. The sailors are diving overboard. The figurehead washes up morosely to stare at everybody's feet, and the few surviving sailors say, "Yeah, it's kind of weird. We don't know what happened. There was just a fire that broke out, and either way, we don't have a ship anymore, so we don't have use for this figurehead. But if we can sell it to anybody, then we can pay for a passage back home." And as best as my memory serves, there was an Italian vessel that was in there, a nice merchant vessel, relatively small. And they said, "Hey, we never had the chance to finance for a figurehead, but sweet, let's grab it." So they grab it, they put it on the front of their ship, and they go sailing off. And the few surviving sailors managed to make it back home. And the Italian vessel goes all over the world. They have, tons of different runs, tons of different supplies. And the first time that they come back into Boston, they are sailing back in. They're laden with all of these nice goods, and everybody's lined up on the dock to wait for them. And they go, "There's something wrong with that ship. It's on fire." And people start jumping overboard
Yeah.
and swim up to their
Yeah.
to the docks. The ship completely burns down. All the supplies are gone, and the figurehead washes up morosely, woo, to the Boston Harbor.
Hey.
And all of the sailors from the ship say, "Yeah, we don't know how the fire started, but hey, anybody want a figurehead?" And all of the other sailors go, "No, absolutely not. We remember this thing. We do not want this." Now, my tour instructor, he would always say that the sailors in Boston had to be superstitious, but the regular lay folk of Boston were only a little bit stitious. And so there's a gentleman who runs a woodworking shop, and he runs his down on the Lincoln Wharf, and he says, "Okay, all the sailors know about this weird object, but nobody else in Boston really pays attention. So I'm going to have this in my shop in the front window, and I'm going to tell everybody that I carved it." And he puts it on display in his woodworking shop, and he has booming business for about 6 months. And after 6 months, something weird happens to his shop. Do you want to guess what happens?
I'm going to guess there's a fire.
Well, not only does his shop burn down, but the whole Lincoln Wharf burns down. Literally end to end, a full section of harbor just goes up in flames for days on end, and no one can like put it out. They
Yeah.
finally get the fire under control, and they are tearing over and going through the rubble, and underneath a blackened ceiling beam, they discover here's this nice wooden figurehead with flammable paint that is completely untouched. And as a result, the woodworker says, well, hey, can I sell this to anybody to pay back for damages for my shop? And everyone says, no,
Oh.
absolutely not. Now, the city of Boston, they say, this thing is a menace.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it up on display. So they take the figurehead, they buy it, and the Boston Historical Society puts it up in the old State House of like, hey, come see a piece of history.
Right.
What if I told you they put it up in 1921, and the old State House that is there is not the original old State House, because a week later the State House caught fire and burned down. And when they were trying to figure out when did this start, how did this start, they looked at, here's this nice untouched figurehead sitting on a pedestal, and they saw here's a ring of heat etched into the floor that was expanding out from it. So after that, when they rebuilt the State House, they go through and they put the figurehead back on display, but they put it behind like fireproof glass. And finally they decided, okay, we need to just put this down in like a nice basement air conditioned room. There were rumors that they decided to do that finally because people kept trying to break the glass to see if it would start another fire or not. But yeah, it's a fun story. I always tell people, especially if they're married couples, it's like, hey, if your wife says maybe stay at home, let the first mate deal with this voyage, maybe listen to her this time.
Yeah, it sounds like a scorned woman.
Yeah, no, it's
Uh,
it's one of those stories that it's out in the public consciousness, and I love telling it just because of the sheer ridiculousness of it. If you want, I can also tell you there's a very fun story from the Omni that almost nobody knows, which is one of my favorites too. But
Let's hear it.
okay, I didn't want to take up too much of your time.
Oh no, this is what we're here for.
So this story, I mean, keep in mind, this is all told, secondhand accounts. There was a gentleman who was this year. So back in about 2016, so about
Okay.
8 years ago, there was a gentleman who went into the Omni and got very, very, very frightened and told this to the front desk. So when you go into the Omni, here's a nice grand lobby, and then if you go up the stairs, there's bathrooms, and around the corner, there's a very famous mirror. There's what's called the Charles Dickens mirror. And when Charles Dickens stayed in the Omni in 1867, going into 1868, he was staying for his first main North America's tour, and he was performing A Christmas Carol. And because he had huge audiences, he would perform A Christmas Carol, basically the entire book in the Christmas season. And as a result, he needed to be able to do a 4.5 hour performance kind of in one go. So while he was in the mezzanine suite, he had this huge mirror, like probably a 15-foot mirror, maybe 10 to 15 feet. And he would literally just perform for himself anywhere from like 9 to 13 hours a day. So when the mirror finally moved out of the mezzanine suite, they've just put it at the end of the hallway where the elevators were. And people will go up and they'll say Charles Dickens' name like he's Bloody Mary. And they sometimes have caught photos of a man's head and shoulders when they say Charles Dickens, or if they leave voice recorders, they will hear passages of A Christmas Carol being read back to them. So a lot of people from all over will try and catch Charles Dickens. There was a gentleman who came up off the street, and he was a regular in the Omni. He was someone who would always go to the bar, someone who would always eat at the restaurants. And he knows, one, that Charles Dickens' mirror is haunted, and two, the main ghost in the Omni Parker house is Harvey Parker, the gentleman who founded the place. Now, Harvey Parker is usually seen in hallways. He's kind of wandering through to different rooms. Sometimes smaller kids have seen him in the middle of the night. They'll wake up and see a gentleman dusting things off, and they'll be like, "Who are you?" And he says, "Oh, I'm room service, don't mind me." And they'll just like accept that and go back to bed. But then there's a nice portrait of him down in Parker's bar in the lobby area, where it's this nice gentleman. He's dressed in like an old-timey coat, has a nice beard, no mustache. Very nice guy. Now, this guy coming in from Boston goes up to see if he can catch a ghost at this Charles Dickens Manor. And in the hallway, opposite of the elevators, there's like a chest of drawers, and there's two chairs on either side. And behind that chest of drawers, there's a couple doorways, and that is for event space. Ironically, I love to tell people that's actually the event room that John F. Kennedy had his bachelor party in, because JFK loved the Omni Parker house. Those event doors are almost always locked.
Mhm.
Either way, when this guy comes up, he goes around the corner to see if he can catch a ghost, and he sees in one of these chairs, there's a tour guide. And he knows that it's a tour guide because this guy is dressed all old-timey and he's trying to look all proper. And who else is going to dress like that except tour guides trying to impress their guests? Oh, look at this guy. And so the guy from Boston sits down on the other side of the chest of drawers. And they're the only two people in the hallway. And the tour guide looks over at him and says, "Hey, do you like this hotel?" And the guy from Boston gets very arrogant about it. And he starts, talking a mile a minute. He says, "Yeah, I love this place. I love the hotel. You know what, Mr. Tour Guide? I know all this stuff about this hotel that they don't tell you saps at all. For example, did you know about 4 or 5 years ago, on one of our Ghosts of Boston tours, there were knocks that were coming from inside that empty chest of drawers. And the kids were knocking on it, and they would get knocks from inside, and it's completely empty. You can open it up, there's nothing inside, but that was happening. There's all of this crazy stuff. There's Charlotte Cushman on this floor, which I have a photo, and I can tell you that story in a moment. There's all this cool stuff. The meat locker downstairs tried to shut employees in, and they had to wedge it open. There's all of this cool stuff that happens here. But even more than the ghosts, I know all the best times of the year to stay here to get the best prices on the rooms. I know all of the best times to chat with the front desk. You get all of the stories that they can't tell. I know all the cool stuff there is to know about this hotel. In fact, I'm in here so much, Mr. Tour Guide, I practically own this hotel. What do you think about that?" And the tour guide is listening and smiling. And finally, this very braggadocious gentleman shuts up. And the tour guide smiles and says, "Well, that's really nice. I'm glad you like this hotel. But I'll have you know, my name's still the one on the sign out front." And the guy from Boston takes a much better look at him and goes, "Oh, God, oh no." And he sees that it's this gentleman with a nice beard and no mustache and sort of cropped hair and a nice old-timey suit. He looks a lot like that Harvey Parker portrait downstairs. And the tour guide just kind of stares at him pleasantly and says, "Aren't you going to ask my name?" And the gentleman from Boston says, "No, you're Harvey Parker." And the tour guide smiles, doesn't say anything else. And the guy from Boston says, "This has been fun," and gets up and runs to the end of the hallway. And at the end of the hallway, he takes a much better, moment to collect himself. He goes, "Hey, everybody here knows that Harvey Parker haunts this hotel. He has photos, he has paintings of himself. We know what he looks like. So if you're doing a tour and you're coming through the Omni and you look like him, why not style your hair to look like him?" So I'm gonna, go back and say like, "Hey, you got me good. This was a good, little scare and whatnot." So he turns back around to say just that to this tour guide, and the elevator doors had not opened, and the event doors were locked, and it had been about 2 seconds, and the hallway was completely deserted. Nobody in it. The guy got so freaked out, he ran downstairs to the front desk, said, "Hey, I just met your boss," explained the story, and then ran up the hotel and never came back. But that kind of circulated as one of those word of mouth stories of like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, Harvey Parker's still here. Um, I love to tell people there's another very good Harvey Parker story that not a lot of people know. About 6 years ago, back in 2018 or so, if you go down the side exit down on Beacon Street, uh, it's kind of a wind tunnel because it's going down Beacon Hill, and you have a nice side exit. It's 3 doors. One of them on the far end is the office. The main two are ones for people to come in. They roll out a nice red carpet for everybody. And across the street, you have King's Chapel, one of the oldest churches. And so it's blocking all of the wind from coming toward the doors. Now, the rug that they roll out, it's very, very heavy. It takes about 3 people to roll up and put in that office every single night. And it has rubber around the edge so that it is not able to be kicked up. You can't really get the wind and the rain to really, mess with the rug. Back in 2018, there was a gentleman, I love to say he got possessed in the last Hurrah Bar and Spirits because he had too many spirits in him in Boston. And he decided to leave without paying his tab. Now, as he left, all the employees were trying to get him back, and he got very belligerent with them, and he walks through the lobby down to the side exit. And there's security camera footage that the front desk at the Omni is not allowed to give out, but they do have employees who do have that footage and are willing to show it. The main person that I know is a gentleman named Steve, who's worked at the Omni for like 35 years. He's a very pleasant fellow. And I've been gracious enough, he's been gracious enough to show me this footage. As the gentleman starts coming down the side exit doors, the camera over that exit sees the doors start to turn, and that rug, that heavy rug, flip up and over a metal post and cover all of the doors in the span of 2 seconds. And the gentleman was so freaked out that as he sees this, he does a 180, goes back in and pays his tab. So I would always tell people, you're in very good hands at the Omni when after almost 200 years, the manager is so dedicated, he's never quit. It's great. It's a great time. Oldest continually running hotel in America. It's never shut its doors aside from during COVID, but we won't talk about that. So
I think that is one of the most that what we see on the reviews that we have from guests, the Omni is one of the most like stories. I think any of the stories that come out of the Omni are just ones that really captivate people and that they really remember. And maybe it's because it's at the end of the tour, but really I think it's just the way that the stories are told and that there's so much detail in them.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your storytelling has evolved, or have you always been a storyteller, or like how did you become such a great storyteller?
Yeah. I've had a very unique journey in that. I'm actually what they used to call Asperger's. I'm on the spectrum, and when I was coming through grade school, I needed a lot of help with communication. I could not pick up on social cues. And back in when I was growing up, the special ed classes were in place, but they were still a little bit in their early developmental stages. And people on the spectrum were all sort of lumped in together, and it was a lot of classes just on communication skills. So some of it would be social cues, but a lot of it was let's practice our conversations and just how do we maintain a conversation with people? How can you read the room? How are you able to captivate people a little bit more? How are you able to communicate what you want in an organized fashion? And that was probably 8 years of schooling. So I had a little bit of a leg up there. And when I went to college, I was a film student. They had a film, advertisement, and journaling all clumped together under our College of Communication here at Boston University. And before you could get to any film classes, it would be, okay, Communication 101. How do you communicate a message through something when you have 30 seconds or a minute to communicate it? And it would be a lot of stuff like filming something and then not relying on dialogue, or relying on a person sitting down and only speaking dialogue. And how do you communicate that? And I my trifecta. I do martial arts. I actually am a I now own a martial arts business as what I do for a living, and that teaches you how to communicate, because
Yeah, sure.
if you can't tell people here's how to punch effectively, then they just don't know how to do that. So it teaches you not just how to, communicate to people, but also how to look for communication. A lot of it is body language,
Mhm.
and over half of it is body language and then what we do with our tone. So the words that I'm saying, I could say or a lot, and you want to kind of refrain from that.
Right.
But the words that I'm actually saying are probably 7% of what is actually getting communicated. A lot of it winds up coming back to like acting and just being able to be expressive in front of people, emote with
Mhm.
what am I doing with my hands that is getting the point across. So a lot of it, when you're doing tour presentation, it's trial and error. It's seeing how can you organize the story in a way that makes sense to you so that you can then communicate it effectively. But then it's just kind of pulling that Charles Dickens of looking at
Mhm.
yourself in a mirror. How am I presenting? What am I doing with my hands? Am I fidgeting? Am I making eye contact with all of the people in the group? That's very
Right.
important. Um, just being able to be approachable, but also a kind of like a live performer for our audience. At the end of the day, you're doing a stage play. It's just you happen to be doing a stage play of history, and you're one person, and everybody is this close to you.
A one-man show out on the streets at night
Yeah,
by
yeah.
yourself.
With a little bit of improv here and there, depending on if there are passers-by who are like, "Ooh," and trying to be spooky.
Right, right. Do you have any memorable guests, either good or bad, from your nights out on tour? I'm sure you've had a handful of characters, but do you have anything
Oh, yes.
out?
I have been grateful enough that, or I have been blessed with
Mhm.
not having any really disruptive guests.
Okay.
Um, I've definitely had experiences where people passing by have been disruptive, but I have not had guests who were very disruptive. I've had a couple memorable guests in a very positive way.
Mhm.
I've had there was at King's Chapel Burying Ground, the oldest burying ground in Boston, established in 1630. There is a weird structure at the end of it. There's the normal burying ground, and then right at the corner, there's this kind of octagon that is kind of aged in, and everybody always asks about it, and I leave it for the end so that it really is drawing people's curiosity. And I'll say, give me whatever you think this is, because I guarantee the truth is weirder. And it's this large gaping hole in the ground. It's very imposing. And we had a boy on the Ghosts of Boston tour who was maybe 7, and he said very immediately, "That's a carousel for dead people." And I said, "Oh my God, I wish it was." Um, we've had people who have guessed everything. We've had, usually it's a well, a crematorium, a witch pit, there was a very drunk fellow who said it was a urinal, and I went, no, it's not that. There were
Please don't.
engine yeah, there were engineering students who said it was back in the 1600s, where when the ground would freeze over in February, you could dig down and make a second row just to hold bodies. And I said, that's way too smart. No, they didn't do that.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
what it actually is a hole in the ground that goes down to our subway system, and it's just a vent for the trains. back in the 1900s, they needed somewhere to let off all of the steam from the
Yep.
subways, and you'll see steam rising through the street, but they needed somewhere else. And they were like, well, we can't disrupt the Omni. They're a nice
Right.
business. We don't want to disrupt Here's King's Chapel, the actual chapel. And we look over at the burying ground. It's like, yeah, they're dead. Who cares? So they just dug down, moved a bunch of people, and it's just to let off steam. And everybody's like, oh my God. I had a lady from France who laughed so hard she wound up punching me in the shoulder, which was very fun. But I've had some people where there was a very nice couple from, I think it was Tennessee, and they were older, and I met them for the Deaf and Dying tour at the top of Beacon Hill,
Mhm.
and the lady looked very shaken up, and I said, hey, is everything all right?
Mhm.
And she said, yeah, but I have never believed in ghosts. I'm 65. I've never believed in ghosts. And I was just using the bathroom before the start of the tour down at the Omni. And as I was walking out, I felt someone over my shoulder, and I heard someone go like in my ear, and I glanced around and there was nobody there, and it really freaked me out. So I can't explain it. Can you please tell me we're not going to the Omni? And I said, that's our bathroom stop. And she went, oh no. And I felt very bad about that. um I think the most memorable tour was probably, I had one tour, and it was just at the start of November, and it might have been that same tour. I had like two groups who were older,
Mhm.
and they were much more fascinated with the history side. They were much more like professorial, like older types who were coming to Boston on like a nice historical visit. And I had one group from our haunted pub crawl tour, where the pub crawl had needed to close for the night because I believe the tour guide, it was not in Boston, but they had gotten their phone like stolen, so they literally couldn't like
Mhm.
deal with anything. And I was, the backup for that of, okay, let's take them on this nice tour instead. And they were very pleasant about that. They understood. Uh, but the group was about 8 or 9 uh, ladies in their 20s who were there for a raucous bachelorette party, and
Mhm.
they had already done a lot of pre-gaming, expecting to get absolutely blasted at all of these bars. So it was 4 or 5 very elderly professorial types, and then 9 girls who wanted the blood and guts, who were like, whoa, there's ghosts here, this is nuts. And it was such a just different worlds.
Right.
And ironically, because everybody was super outgoing, they all, got to laugh and chat with one another and talk about, here's, how our time in Boston has been, here's what your time in Boston has been. They were all like best friends at the end of the night, but it was such a weird mix of groups that you would not expect to mesh very well. And then it just
Yeah.
worked like a charm.
Yeah. That's that often happens where you get people, but there's always that one thread that's connecting people, and you never know what it is until
Yeah,
it's later on or at the end or something like that. It's always that one thread of there's some commonality between everybody that we're all here in this one space together. Did you grow
absolutely.
up believing in ghosts or being surrounded by paranormal or even liking scary movies? Like how did this become like a niche kind of interest of yours?
I I have a very unique journey with that. Long before I was born, my parents actually worked as paranormal investigators they used to live in Minnesota, and they were very much riding that kind of new age, what can we learn about like witchcraft and alternative stuff and magic and all that kind of thing. And whenever they had friends who were like, hey, I think my apartment's haunted, well, let's just call them and see,
Yeah.
because they know all this stuff, let's pass it off on them.
Mhm.
So they have all of these crazy stories. um they both grew up believing in ghosts, and my dad loves movies. So I would have them both, chatting just very nonchalantly about ghosts.
Mhm.
And I grew up on the old Universal monster movies from the 1930s and 40s.
Okay.
My very first film that I remember start to finish is The Mummy from 1932.
It's
Um,
great special effects.
oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's life-changing. The audio is terrible because they had not figured that part out, but
Right.
you watch, here's Boris Karloff starting to come to
Mhm.
life, and he's all dusty, and then his eyes start to open. It's like, oh, as a little
Yeah.
5-year-old me.
Mhm.
But I was always skittish about like, oh, ghosts and paranormal stuff.
Mhm.
And my parents would read books that had it, like John Belair's The House with a Clock in His Walls. Or its walls, I should say, if I would pronounce my words correctly. Um, so I was surrounded by it. People ask me all the time of, did you ever experience anything?
Mhm.
And I will always say, I don't know. Um, I probably have seen stuff in passing, but I'm more focused on the guests in downtown Boston. So if there's orbs or ghosts passing by, then it's not my concern. Um,
They're not after you, they're after your guest.
yeah, it's there
They
for
bring
it's
that
there for
stuff.
the guests. Uh, I've had a couple of weird things that have happened like
Mhm.
outside
Mhm.
of the tour. I mean, I've had times I've been at my old house and I would just hear bread falling off the counter, and I would know it would be very much in the middle of a counter with no windows open, and I would just
Right.
wander into that room and be like, "Guys, stop doing it. I'm lazy. I don't want to come back," and it would stop. I mean, my partner lived in a house that was like 120 years old, so we would hear knocks at the door all the time, and there'd be nobody there. Um, the main instance of this was the closest I ever got was the night that my grandmother died. And I want to preface this by saying she was not a very nice lady. Please do not feel bad for her.
Okay.
She was a very mean lady, my dad's mother. And she had a house in Needham Heights, and the driveway was very, very long. It was probably a good 20 yards of driveway, and it was like down this nice low slope, and then you had, here's like this nice 2-story or 3-story house. And she was adamant in her later years that she was not going to go into a nursing home, and for her health we had to put her in a nursing home to be responsible so that someone was able to take care of her and she wasn't just living alone with potential hazards. So she sort of went in and out of lucidity, realized she was in a nursing home, and was so angry at us that she went on an all ice chips diet, and did not survive that long. While she was in the nursing home, she was a hoarder, and we said, okay, she's most likely not coming back out, so we need to start being able to sell the things in her house that are worth value, or rehoming them, or if it's just trash, just getting it into a dumpster somewhere. And that was a nightmarish process that took a couple months. And at the end of all that, the house was standing empty, and uh, we were driving from our house to the nursing facility to see her. And we got a call on our brand new cell phones that tells you when this was.
Yeah.
Um, on our brand new cell phones that, hey, she's passed away. But the drive itself was probably a full hour, and we were 50 minutes of the 60 minutes there. We were tired. It was late at night. There was nowhere open, and my parents needed the bathroom. My dad had kidney stone problems, and he had just had a lithotripsy, so his bladder wasn't working that well. He was like, well, my mom's house is right around the corner. I'm just going to stop there. It's the house I grew up in, and whatever. So he goes around, and my mom is in the passenger seat going, Walter, no, she's going to be there. She's going to be angry because all of her precious trash is gone
Yeah.
and her house is empty, and she's pissed at us. please, let's just find like a McDonald's or somewhere. And he's like, ah, it's gonna be fine, because that's my dad. So
Right.
he, parks at the end of the driveway, walks out, walks down the driveway, goes in the house. And my mom says, Justin, do you need the bathroom? And little 10-year-old me is like, I really need the bathroom. And I say, nope, I do not need the bathroom. And she
Mhm.
goes, yeah, me neither. And my mom has the uh, bladder of someone who needs the bathroom all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so we're staring down, like, 50 feet away. Here's this like just deserted house, completely empty, uh, all pitch black. And it had, my memory might be tainted a little bit, but because it's in a nice little grove of trees, it's just even more shadowed, and you can just feel the house right from here. Like, it is not pleasant. And after about 5 minutes, my dad finally comes back and he taps on the passenger window instead of getting in. And my mom says, what? And he goes, hey, Laura, can you come on out? Because I think we might have missed something. And she went, and just walked out and went down into the house.
Yeah.
And I'm
You're-
sitting there alone, and I'm
Okay.
just like twiddling my thumbs.
Hmm.
And after about 2 minutes, they come back out, and they get in the car and we leave. And I hear much later that as my dad went in, when he was using the bathroom, he felt something whack onto his shoulder, and he heard like a metal clang, like a fire poker or something. And because there was no electricity and we didn't have flashlights or anything, he was like groping around on the ground to see, hey, did we miss anything for when we're showing this place to realtors so we can sell it? And he called my mom in, and my mom described it as, here's the hallway, here's the bedroom door, and here's the bathroom. And they're walking to the bathroom, and in the bedroom, in her peripheral vision, she sees my grandmother standing there, full apparition, just livid, and
She
just,
was still there, like
yeah,
you're
in
left
her bedroom.
back
And my mom,
there.
I love my mom to pieces. My grandmother was very much a bully,
Mm.
and my mom is the only person who would stood up to her
Yeah.
in life. And my dad is like, oh, Laura, we got to find whatever we lost on the ground and whatnot so that we can show this place. And my mom goes, honey, it doesn't matter if there's anything on the ground. The house is empty because she's dead. Let's go. And just turns and grabs him and leaves, and leaves this angry apparition standing there. And they get back in the car and drive away. And the house got, sold to a real estate developer and demolished, and now it's condominiums. So if
Probably
you
for the
are,
best. I mean,
yeah,
it's
if you're
haunting the
living in
car.
condos in Needham Heights and you're like, hey, this room feels chilly for some reason,
Hey,
sorry.
yeah, your fireplace poker is also missing.
Yeah, well, but they have a ton of weird, eccentric stories. I, for better or worse, don't have any real ghost stories of this happened to me. But I have a lot of those wonderful stories.
Mhm.
So
That's funny. That's a good, I mean, as far as childhood stories go, that pretty much tops any of mine that I ever have. So, never going to compete in that competition again. um, do do you believe in the ghostly energy of the stories, or at night when you're out on tour, or do you think you're just really good at storytelling?
I think it's some of it. I want to refrain from sounding egotistical.
Mhm.
Some
Oh
of it
my
is
gosh, you are a
practice.
five-star guide. I mean, like,
I appreciate it.
so you can sound a little egotistical here. Do you think
No, yes, oh, it's all me. Some of
and
it
you've
is,
trained our team, and everyone on our team is a five-star guide. So, I
yeah,
mean, I'll give you that much for it. So do you think that there's ghostly energy, or you're just really good at your job?
I think it's a mix. I think obviously, a lot of it is how are you presenting?
Mhm.
And when you are a performer, you'll what they don't really mention in any kind of performances, if it's a concert, if it is a play, if it is what we do,
Mhm.
any kind of performance is you're raising energy,
Mhm.
and the guests are kind of feeding off of that energy. And it is important to not necessarily be high energy all the time. You don't want to be hyper all the time,
Right.
but to be somebody that's able to give that energy out for them to then be like, "Ooh, here's this story, here's this spooky thing." That's very important.
Mhm.
And that is something that I have worked a lot on trying to harness, trying to be able to, connect to here's what these people want to see, here's how I can kind of uh, fit my performance into that sphere of what they want to see. And here's, kind of just checking in based on their faces, based on their body language of, is that working? And if not, how can I kind of shift my tactic? Um, the other part of it is, I mean, it's an old city. It's 400 years old.
Mhm.
It's got, if not the energy, then it definitely has the presence. And I think when you are raising that energy, and talking about these stories, and people are, whether they're skeptical or whether they're believing in that stories, if they're surrounded by that location, part of why the Omni works so well is you're literally surrounded by it. It's a
Right.
full 360 around you, floor, ceiling, walls. It's
Mhm.
a building from the 1700s. It has a lot of history to it.
Mhm.
And you get a lot of buildup from people who unconsciously are giving that energy out of, here's what I want to see. If
Mhm.
it is, an orb, if it is a figure, if it is hearing a creak in the wood,
Right.
then you just get a lot of people where they are so focused on it that regardless of if it is something that it's dust in the air or an actual ghost orb, if they see it, then it becomes more real, at least to them. And that also, I personally believe that all of that energy, I mean, it's a law of physics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. So in putting it out into the world, it's just manifested kind of as that, what we would call a thought form,
Mhm.
as here's something where it might literally be created by the guests looking at it, but then it does become real.
Yeah.
So I like to think of it kind of as a double-edged sword of, it's real because the energy's there, and the energy is there because your focus is there, and that makes it real.
So, what is kind of like a lesser known haunted spot that you wish you could take people on tour, or that you wish you could go and just like, if you could only pick one spot maybe and like show it off as a more haunted place, do you have somewhere that you would like to go?
Somewhere that isn't on the tour, but I
Mhm.
have heard a lot of stories about it. I would say probably the Central Burying Ground in
Okay.
Boston. It's on the far edge of Boston Common. Um, the Central Burying Ground's a real weird case, and a lot of it is kind of word of mouth stuff. It's known as a haunted spot, and it also isn't what we focus on a lot. It's a lot less pleasant than a lot of the stops
Mhm.
that we talk about. So I love to tell people the Boston Common, established 1634. Originally, the Puritan government really wants it in 1630 because you have this nice 50 acres of land, and it was owned already by a gentleman. I believe he was actually the very first English settler in Boston, a gentleman named William Blackston. And Blackston was a hunter-gatherer type, very rugged, live off the land guy. He was an Anglican minister who was very bored with kind of religion. And when there was a 1621 expedition to the New World, he said, I'm gone, I'm good.
Mhm.
Everyone else left to go back to England because establishing a colony was just so darn hard. And he said, screw it, I'm staying here. So he would trade with the Native Americans. He would live off the land. He like built his own cabin. And then 10 years or so later, all of these very uptight Puritans come in saying, yes, we would like to establish our religious colony. And he goes, oh, God. And for 4 years, they say, can we buy this land from you? Or can you gift it to us because it'd be real swell for our colony?
Right.
And he goes, I'm not gifting you a darn thing. And after 4 years, he gets so frustrated with them that he starts riding around horseback through his property every day. And all of their houses are surrounding his property. And he, on the warmest days, would ride horseback completely naked just to kind of stick it to them of like, yeah, original sin. And they did not like that. John Winthrop, our first governor, he winds up buying the land for, I think, about $4,000 in today's money.
Okay.
And all that land becomes public property. It becomes the first official like parkland in Boston and in the New World. And ironically enough, William Blackstone takes all that money, goes south, and founds the state of Rhode Island. So if you ever go and visit Rhode Island, please remember the guy who founded it rode horseback naked in Boston Common.
Yeah.
I love
Literally
that fact.
bareback horse riding during the Puritan times, which adds another element to that.
He was not well liked. Either way, when the land became public, what they don't tell you about Boston Common is it became kind of a public burying spot. And you would have people where they were not able to be interred in King's Chapel or the Granary because they could not afford it, or because they were someone who was a criminal. And of course, criminal in Puritan times was a little bit loose. The main crime in Puritan times was blasphemy, which you could literally act weird and then say, hey, Greg from down the street, who I don't like, is a witch, go hang him, and everyone would be like, yeah, okay. But you would also have legitimate criminals, pirates, Rachel Wall and her crew, and other people who were casualties of war, someone who it was, British redcoat soldiers or Native Americans from King Philip's War. And all of these bodies start to be collected in this area. Now, the way that I had heard it in 1894, when they broke ground to dig through the subway tunnels, our oldest subway system in America, they dig down at Park Street Station to dig over to Boylston Station, and this is right on the edge of the Central Burying, or the Boston Common, and they run into 1,000 bodies in various states of decomposition in like a block and a half. And there's a group of British redcoat soldiers that they try and give back to England, and everybody else is just like, okay, these are literal Puritan remains that their families are long dead. We don't know where to put them. And so a lot of them get put in the furthest edge of Boston Common, where there was an extra small cemetery, the Central Burying Ground. And when the Central Burying Ground was opened, there was a report that they had this nice ribbon cutting ceremony. Here's this beautiful graveyard area, and the crowd lines up for the ribbon cutting, and there was an explosion underfoot that injured or killed an additional 50 people. And to this day, to the best of my knowledge, we still don't know what exactly caused it, but it was like a gas line right under the front gate. Now, when the Central Burying Ground opened, you have a lot of people who have gone over and reported feeling very heavy feelings. They've taken photos, and there's a lot of ghost evidence in photographs of it. I don't believe it's open to the public, but I do know that there were stories of people hopping the fence on dares. And the most infamous story was a college student who hopped a fence on a dare back in 2016 and was like filming stuff with his iPhone, and realized that as he got toward the center, there was a lady at the other end. And he was like, oh, that's weird. I didn't see her hop the fence.
Right.
And she was like this lady dressed like in a white dress. And she kind of glanced over and waved at him, and he waved back. And as he turned around, he realized that she was there when he turned, but a little bit closer. and then a little bit closer and a little bit closer until she was right up in his face, grabbed his phone and hurled it into the furthest edges of the cemetery. And whenever he tried to turn, she basically would just like peer back into his face and started laughing at him at like this very cruel, like laughter. And he finally had to shut his eyes, scramble through, grab his phone, knocks his hips into a bunch of cemetery stones, and then like jumps the fence to get away. I always tell people, if I mention that story, it's like, hey, don't go into the cemetery if they say don't go into it.
Yeah.
But that's one of those that I don't get to take people down there just because it's like a 2-block walk or so. But even walking by there in the middle of the daytime, whether it's because it's a cemetery or because it just has that reputation, there's a lot of contemplative energy in looking at it. And that becomes, oh, I'm dealing with my own mortality, which then
Right.
becomes more melancholic. So it's a
Yeah.
weird spot.
Yeah. I also think every city has a lady in a white dress, a blue dress, and a black dress.
Yeah.
A requirement when establishing cities that there must be a lady who haunts in those 3 color dresses. I don't know if she's got
Yep.
it somewhere or like,
I have 2 of those stories. I don't have the blue dress, but I have a white dress and a black dress story.
yeah, it's just kind of a standard. I just think like, oh, you're building a city. Get your lady in the white dress? Where's your lady in the blue? And then don't forget the lady in black because
Yep.
she needs to be here too.
Actually, I think I have a photo of the lady in black, which I can show you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the white dress story first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is I don't know if it's the oldest ghost in Boston. I know that it's the oldest ghost that I talk about because she goes all the way back to like the 1730s. She's the White Witch of Boston Common. And it's a woman that is seen usually on June 21st, which was the day that she was hanged. And she is seen in Quaker white. And it's almost a yearly tradition that people will see her at least once. She's not only on June 21st, but it's like the go-to date that people see her.
Right.
So there was a woman named Mary Dyer. She was one of the original Puritans. She fought for religious freedom for the Puritans until 1635 in England, and then came over to the New World. And everybody in the New World had imposed much worse laws, especially if you're a lady, you can't pray at all. Excuse me. And she had said, like, I just fought for you for 5 years back home, and now I don't have any rights. What the heck? So her and her friend Ann Hutchinson, they start hosting prayer meetings in their home, or in Ann Hutchinson's home, which if you go down the block from the side exit of the Omni and you go down to where the Old South Meeting House is, if you look over, there's a Chipotle. And that is the building that Ann Hutchinson's home used to be. So I'm like, it's a famous building.
That is how I would want to come back, is with the Chipotle on top of my house. Then I will come back and I'll grab some lunch and then I'll come haunt you.
Absolutely. It makes me laugh every time when I go down there and I'm like, and look at that Chipotle. And everyone's like,
Chipotle. The ghost pepper Chipotle.
I think it's not the same building itself, but it's the same like location.
Right. Yeah.
But eventually John Winthrop finds out about their hosting prayer meetings. He kicks Ann Hutchinson out. Mary Dyer supports her, like the only person in the colony to support her. And everyone else in the colony is like, wait a darn second, and starts trying to get the dirt on Mary Dyer. So Mary Dyer leaves. Both of them go down to Rhode Island to hang out with the guy who rode horseback naked. And when in Rhode Island, Mary Dyer actually winds up going back to England for a couple of years. She goes back because Parliament has beheaded King Charles. They are trying to find, can we have our own government? And she is trying to fight for Puritan rights under Parliament. It doesn't work. She winds up, however, just completely getting rid of the Puritan lifestyle for Quakerism. because it's a lot of the same things, but the Quakers are much more focused on religious freedom. They're much more focused on, it doesn't matter what religion you are. If you are, you know, a God-fearing soul, then we will
Right.
take care of you. And also they have better oatmeal. So Mary Dyer comes back to Boston, says, hey, here's my Quaker beliefs. These are
Mhm.
pretty neat. John Winthrop goes, get out of here. And so she goes down to Rhode Island, establishes the very first Quaker settlement in the nation. The first place. It did not matter where, what religion you were, and if you were male or female, you could pray here and we would take care of you. Just like, don't kill us, please.
Right.
So she winds up developing a Quaker settlement in New York when New York had just started, and over 5 to 10 years had tried repeatedly to do so in Boston. And every time they kick her out, and every time it finally becomes, we're going to kick you out upon pain of death, like, if you come back, we will hang you. And she's not daunted by this. She tells the government point blank, like, if you decide to do this, I will be a martyr to my cause. I believe in this so justly that this is what we should do, that I am going to do this.
Mhm.
And she has friends in Boston. She has a lot of family and friends who are like, dang, good for you. You go, girl. And she finally comes back in 1660, and they say, we told her twice. And so on June 21st, they take her down to the Great Elm to hang her in the middle of Boston Common. And everybody's expecting her to crack under the pressure of hanging, and she's standing up there very stoically, and she delivers a very calm last words, which I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's essentially, we left England because they were treating us like this. We should not settle for our own government treating us the same way. And everybody's very impressed by her. She hangs, and she comes back each year on that June 21st. She's reported as far back as 1730 in newspapers of, here's this urban legend that had already been established by that time of this white witch. Now, people have seen her. People have taken photos of her. People have actually chatted with her. There's stories of her walking up and down the pathways, just saying, good night to some people, or stories of people where they're down on their luck and sleeping off a hangover on the park benches, and they'll wake up and there's this lady sitting next to them, and they're freaked out of like, oh my God, this is a ghost. But she's very pleasant and says something of complete unimportant, something like, it's a pleasant night, I hope you're doing well. And then when they get up the next day, anybody who runs into her, they report in the next couple of days feeling very inspired and a feeling of like good luck and momentum. And people have gone so far as to like quit their jobs and then go to whatever their dream job is and be like, I'm going to pursue this. And while it may not be something that makes them a ton of money and makes them super rich and super famous, it still works out for them in the long run. So there's a lot of good stories about that white witch of Boston
Yeah,
Common.
she sounds a little scandalous,
Yeah, she's
especially for Puritan Quaker times.
yeah, first lady to ever separate church and state in the New World. And there's a nice statue of her right outside our state house, which we get the opportunity to see.
Mhm.
Which it's good. She's a nice lady. She was tough as nails. I love her.
Something back then.
Yeah,
She had insight.
I have 6 kids. What are you gonna do to me, government?
Right.
Uh, but our other ghost, if I
Yeah.
have enough time,
Yep,
I want
go
to.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Our other ghost um, I mentioned earlier in the Omni Parker house, there's a woman named Charlotte Cushman.
Mhm.
And Charlotte Cushman, she is uh, there we go. She was an actress back in the day. People have called her like the Meryl Streep of her time,
Okay.
because she had this really long career. She had just huge success. She wanted to be a singer, wasn't able to because she had a very low voice. And wound up going onto the theater and the stage and whatnot. She actually has a Wikipedia page with a photo of her, and she has like a nice squared off face, cropped hair. She was most famous for her Lady Macbeth. In fact, Abraham Lincoln, before he passed away, actually gets to see her on stage and said she was one of like the best Lady Macbeths he had ever seen. She had this long, long career, had a huge party life, was a very jovial person. Eventually, in the 1850s, after her decades-long career, she decides to retire. And she is getting a little bit older, so she goes on this long farewell tour that lasts for 20 years, like Tom Brady, and then finally she does retire, and she comes here to Boston in 1875 because her health is starting to fail. Now, in Boston, we had really good hospitals, and she stays in the Omni Parker House in the mezzanine suite where Charles Dickens used to stay, and she just buys out the suite. She lives in the suite because she's rich and she can do that.
Mhm.
And every day she takes the elevators on the mezzanine floor down and goes out on these nice long rambles through Boston Common and comes on back. And sadly, her health deteriorated, and these nice long walks sort of did not contribute to that because she was taking nice long walks in the middle of the winter months and wound up developing pneumonia and actually passed away in the mezzanine suite in February of 1876. Now, when she passed away, three things changed on that mezzanine floor. The first thing was people will report hearing a lady's voice, a nice low voice, laughing or singing to herself all the time on that floor. And they don't know why, but they will look around the corners and there's just nobody there. The second thing is, and I have actually seen this, I usually see this every month, probably 2 to 3 times. The elevator doors will stop at the mezzanine floor.
Mhm.
And on the mezzanine floor, the elevators will open and close with nobody calling them. And sometimes there's guests of the hotel inside who poke their head out and are like, this isn't my floor. And sometimes it's, nobody there, but it happens. And, I've seen it probably 50 times or so. And the hotel knows about it. The hotel, you ask the staff about it, and they are very diligent about keeping everything in good maintenance. They want everything to be, up to shape,
Mhm.
and they know that this happens. And after maintenance, it still continues to happen. And they got so tired of trying to fix it, they said, yeah, that's Charlotte Cushman. She's coming back from a walk. So anytime the elevator doors open, I would just say, like, hi, Charlotte. And everybody's like, oh, if that already told them that story. But the third thing is you would get people who would catch occasional glimpses of a lady in a nice black evening dress, kind of
Mhm.
walking the hallways.
Mhm.
And I haven't seen this personally. I don't know any of my guests who have seen this personally. However, about 2 years ago, I was finishing up a tour and I came up to the Omni after the tour was done to go use the bathroom. And there was a lady who had been sitting in the hallway who noticed me and said, hey, you ghost boy, come here. And I went, "Oh, okay." And she took me over to the mirror and she said, who is this? And she held up her phone. And there was a photo of a guy in the mirror taking, a photograph, and then a lady over his shoulder. And this woman tells me, this is my brother. He was in town about 2 years and 6 months ago now, 6 months back from when this happened to me.
Mhm.
He was in town for, of all things, a Photoshop convention because he was an engineer on Photoshop.
Mhm.
And he took this photo and he doesn't believe in ghosts, and I don't believe in ghosts. And we don't know who this is because we know that this isn't a glitch in the camera, and he swears there was nobody else there. And I'm out of options. Can you tell me who this is? Because you know ghost stuff. And I say that looks like Charlotte Cushman, just based on, one, it's a lady in the mezzanine. Two, it's a lady who has kind of that squared off jaw and she has that cropped hair. And three, she has kind of like an old time evening dress. When I was doing this tour back in July, we had a lady who, when she saw the photo, she went, that's an 1870s bodice that she's wearing, even though it's a little bit blurry and hard to see. And I said, how do you know? And the guest said, I work on Hollywood films doing like historic clothing renovation. So, I mean, a lot of this is hearsay, it's secondhand evidence. You kind of make of it what you will. I've had guests who are be like, oh yeah, he was in here for a Photoshop convention and caught a full body apparition. Oh, and I go, yeah, that fact has not fallen on deaf ears, but
Mhm.
I like to think, even if it's Photoshop, then it's somebody who did that research on Charlotte Cushman, because it's a good photo and it's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And it has, I'll just let you know, there's like a painting over the back of her head. You can still see where the head is, but there's just painting in back. So let me, uh, hopefully that will focus.
Yep. I see it. It almost looks like like the morning dresses that
Yeah.
there's something there.
Yeah. So I was gracious enough, or she was gracious enough rather. I asked her, I almost begged, please send me that photo so that I
Right.
can, see it. And she did. And she sent it to the Omni, and they put it up on I think on one of their Instagram pages of just like, ooh, we have ghosts.
Right.
And I I love to tell people that as that ended, she had this very kind of expression,
Mhm.
and she wandered away, and I said, ma'am, that's a great photo, you shouldn't be upset, like you have a really good piece of evidence there. And she said something to the effect of, I know I have a good photo here, but this sucks. How come my brother gets to meet the celebrities and I don't? This place sucks. And so she just left. So it was very funny. um, but anytime we have guests who are very freaked out by Charlotte Cushman, I
Mhm.
say, don't worry. If you look at her Wikipedia page, she's a very fun-loving lady.
Mhm.
She's a very nice woman. The scariest thing about her was that she apparently had a penchant for stealing men's wives. And I'm like, everyone needs a hobby. I don't know. So I would have loved to have run into her. But
Okay.
that's like Lady in White and Lady in Black.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's
Mrs. Blue.
standard. Yeah. It's like the standard ghosts for each city. So just let's do one final question here to wrap it
Yeah.
up. If you had to pick one ghost from Boston's past, which one would it be that you could meet?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think now of all the different ones. There's some that they would be fun to meet, but I'm not
Mhm.
fun people, but I'm not sure I would want to meet them.
Mhm.
I mean, you have Rachel Wall, or female pirate, who I probably wouldn't want to meet because she, while being a very fun story, is not a very nice lady.
Right.
Um, she, she got caught because she stole a bonnet, and then when the woman she was stealing a bonnet tried to protest, Rachel Wall tried to cut out her tongue, and the police were like, no, let's not have that. So
Yeah.
maybe not Rachel Wall.
Yeah.
um
I have some concerns, I guess, about that one.
yeah. Harvey Parker would be nice, of course. Charlotte Cushman would be nice, of course. Just for the clout of, oh, I meet somebody scary. There's the smoking man up in room 303,
Mhm.
the gentleman who killed himself in room 303, who comes back as an apparition smoking.
Mhm.
People have actually said that story of him returning and haunting the guests is what inspired the Stephen King story 1408 about the haunted hotel room. Um, but maybe not. If I'm going with the more milk toast answer, then I would definitely say Mary Dyer, because one, she's a hard as nails lady, but also you get the added benefit of like, yeah, she's inspiring. I can
Right.
I can get past my writer's block and all that sort of thing.
A little bit of a muse for you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Very
mean, there's a lot of interesting stories, and you always break it down into who are the people where they are kind of the residual hauntings and the people that are the intelligent hauntings.
cool. Mhm.
And the residual hauntings, I mean, it'd be awesome to meet Charles Dickens.
Right.
It'd be great to say his name in a mirror and then get like a nice selfie with him, but then you don't really meet him the same way that you could have a conversation with
Mhm.
someone like Harvey Parker or Charlotte Cushman or Mary Dyer. Likewise with Rachel Wall, there's a poltergeist in the Boston Athenaeum, our oldest library, named and now I'm going to blank on his name, James Allen.
Okay.
And he was a highwayman who was apparently really, really, really swell and a very fun-loving guy,
Mhm.
unless he was trying to rob you. And of course, if he was trying to rob you, then that's not great.
Right.
But he would get released from prison for being just like a jovial dude and having good behavior. And now, of course, he's tearing it up in the library because he has his autobiography there that was made with his human skin at his request. Um,
That's not weird at all. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
if that's your dying wish.
yeah, I have to laugh because his dying wish was, I want to write my autobiography. I want to make it out of my human skin, and I'm going to give it to the guy who helped catch me, who was the only person who beat me up. And that fellow, John Fenno, I love to tell people he did what any of us would do with a
Mhm.
human skin book. He keeps the book, and then if his kids or grandkids misbehave, he takes the book off the shelf and throws it at them to make them scream. So just parenting stuff.
Yeah, sounds like a good tactic to use.
Yeah, honestly, I'd probably marry Dyer.
Okay.
I just think, it would be nice to let her know that, and I mean, she probably knows
Mhm.
that her work was not in vain, but it would be nice to say, like, look, we aren't an all Puritan society here in Boston.
Right.
Like, your work had massive ripples and impact. It'd be nice to tell her, and nice to get the added benefit of like, hey, I feel great about whatever I'm going to go do.
Yeah, she'd be a happy one to part with.
Absolutely. And I could tell people I met a ghost that, goes all the way back to the 1700s.
Mhm. Well, Justin, thanks so much for sitting down today and for sharing all of your love of Boston and for just
Absolutely.
all of the awesome hauntings, and for sharing your experiences on tour and for being on tour with us. It has always been a pleasure. It was great to actually finally meet you for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually all of our talks are through text messaging, so this is really nice to actually sit down and talk to you for a little bit. So thanks for your time and thanks for all of your really great stories.
Thank you. Thank you for offering to have me on. It means a lot.
Uh,
And thank you for listening to me yap for however long this has been.
I mean, we'll pay for it, and it's always enjoyable. I know your stories will continue on even after you have left our tours. You've left a big impression on a lot of our guides, and your stories will stay with them as they continue to take guests out through Boston. So thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Justin. All right. So we are all done for today. Make sure you tune in for our next episode of Hometown Hauntings.
Hometown Hauntings is brought to you by Ghost City Tours, the largest ghost tour company in the nation. With tours in over 20 cities, including New Orleans, Savannah, Charleston, and beyond, we bring haunted history to life with spine-tingling tales and expert storytelling. Ready to experience the paranormal up close? Book now at ghostcitytours.com to explore a haunted city near you.